Don't know if you know the phrase, going for glory. It's usually on the football field. Somebody's going for glory. And what it really means is that he's hung on to the ball too long, wanting to score the goal himself, instead of passing to somebody who is in much better position and much more likely to score the goal. So it's usually used in that sort of sense, that somebody wants to make a hero of himself, but he's failed miserably. He hasn't done. The ball has got over the bar, and it's not anything that's like glory. There's just a big ah that comes out of the crowd. So going for glory really has that sort of pejorative sense, and it's not a word that we kind of think of too often in good terms. But here today, we're thinking of the glory of God. The collect for today speaks about Jesus who went not up to glory, but first he suffered pain. And this idea of Jesus being there and entering the glory of God is very prevalent. Now, I can speak for several days about this word glory. It's a word that's so full of content. From the very beginning of the gospel, there's this talk about the glory of God. Abraham sees it, Moses sees it, and down through the prophets we have this idea. And particularly, I think, we have three ways in which it's seen, the glory of God. First of all, Moses sees it, and he sees it at the time when he goes up into the mountain and receives from God the law. God's glory is revealed there. Clouds and darkness are round about him, says the psalmist. Righteousness and darkness are the foundation of his throne. The heavens declare his righteousness, and all the people have seen his glory. That's the law given to us. And Moses, I suppose, revels in that scene. And in a way, the reading that we had from Paul's epistle speaks about that time. That you remember that Moses went up, received the law, came down, found that all the people were worshipping the golden calf, got mad, broke the tablets, and then he went up again and spent 40 days on the mountain with the Lord. So he was there, and during that time, he said, God said to him, my presence will go with you, and I will give you rest. And Moses' request to God was, show me your glory. Show me your glory. And, of course, spending that time with God, his face shone. And that's the veil that we were hearing about in the gospel reading, the veil that Moses covered his face with in order that the people should not be so overawed by the fact that God was with him, God was in him, God was speaking through him, that they could hear actually what he was saying. So here is Moses particularly, but we can go on to a whole lot of other incidents. Elijah, we could talk about Elijah too, but I'll miss that out for the moment. Isaiah, that great vision that he has in the temple, that he went into the temple. I saw the Lord high and lifted up, and his train filled the temple. You know that passage so well. And it's recorded every time we meet that the seraphim crying, holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. The whole earth is full of his glory. And so in special ways, when people were commissioned or asked to do particular tasks by God, that their basis for doing that was that they saw the glory of the Lord. And I think Paul refers to that again in that first reading, that he's seen the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. And inevitably our minds go to the Damascus Road, where he saw that great light, fell off his horse, and says, "Who are you, Lord?" "I am Jesus." So he's seeing the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ and being commissioned by him for a particular task. So God comes and reveals his glory, his majesty to us. So it's something to do with God himself, nothing to do with our own abilities or our own attempts to do well. So the glory of God is revealed. It's God alone who has glory. You remember those well-known passages in Isaiah. "I am the Lord is my name. I shall not yield my glory to another, nor my praise to any other, to any idol." Or again, "I will not let my name be profaned, or yield my glory to any other god." So God alone has this quality. It's about his character, his righteousness, his reaching out to us in the radiance of his splendor. That's what God is. He's come to us, and he's there. So, special people, the law, but also in worship. One of the great things about Ezekiel is that he, as it were, sees the Lord and his association with the worshipping community. So when we gather together, in a sense, the glory of God is here. Every now and then it breaks out. And I'm sure that we've had experiences that no matter how long we've been in church, but just occasionally, suddenly, we're aware of the wonder, the glory of God himself among us. And that glory is revealed to us in our worship. So it's something that I think we really need to hold on to, that here God is with us, glorious, just as he was with Peter and James and John when they went up into the mountain and they saw Jesus transfigured. And their first instinct was to focus on a time of praise and prayer. Let us build 3 tabernacles here. But I run ahead of myself. I'll come back to it in a minute. And one of the just one other thing to say is that there is, particularly toward the end of the writings of the prophets, in the last section of Isaiah's writings, the glory of God is seen in what we do. So it's something that we reflect in what we do. And this rather lovely passage in Isaiah chapter 58, "Is not sharing your food with the hungry, taking the homeless poor into your house, clothing the naked when you meet them, and never evading a duty to your kinsfolk? Then your light will break forth like the dawn, and new skin will speedily grow over your wound. Your righteousness will be your vanguard, and the glory of the Lord your rear guard." Surrounded in what we do by the glory of God. giving us the impetus to go out and reflect God in all that we do. So, God active, God glorious, shining out in the midst of us. And it seems to me that in a way there was always in the Old Testament this expectation that somehow God, who had come in these various ways that I'm describing, will come more fully in the ultimate presence, that God himself would come among his people. There's a little story in the one of the books of Maccabees, which were written, as it were, sort of about 100 years before Jesus, and during the wars against the Greeks, when Israel were struggling for their own existence. And they tell a little story about how at the end, when the temple was being destroyed, or just before the temple was destroyed, Jeremiah took the Ark of the Covenant, the tent, and various other elements, and he hid them in a cave, which he then blocked off so that people would never find it again. He said this place shall remain unknown until God finally gathers his people together and shows them his favor. The Lord will then bring these things to light once more, and his glory will appear together with the cloud. Well, that's the kind of emphasis they have of suddenly God coming again. And that imagery is exactly what we find in the Transfiguration. The Lord will bring to light once more, and his glory will appear together with them in the cloud. Here is God appearing. Now, one of the things that we must note about this is that this is Jesus. And he, that great passage in Philippians, he did not count equality as a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself, taking the form of a servant. And what I think that tells us is that actually the less of us that there is to interfere with, as it were, God channeling his life into the world, the better. Jesus was able to do that. He emptied himself. And so God could take possession of him. He never got in the way of God. He never blocked God's access to the world. That was why the light of God shone in the face of Christ, just that, and known more so than on the cross, where absolutely everything was emptied, gave away his life, emptied himself, as the great hymn says, emptied himself of all but love, because that was God, just filling him and allowing him to be there. So, just let me say two things in the end. One is that, yes, I've been referring to the Old Testament and to Elijah and to Moses and the great prophets of the past and the great events of the Old Testament, but actually in our awareness of God, they only go so far that in the end, we haven't got to have Jesus on the same pedestal as Moses and Elijah. He's on his own. He goes beyond anywhere that they have gone, beyond them, to be a revelation of the glory of God to us, shining out with the radiance of God so that we can grasp that And when we come in our worship to him, we come to Jesus, so that the radiance of God may shine out, and we rid ourselves of anything. We empty ourselves as he does, so that God can fill us and his light can appear in us and through us. Amen.